Hi guys, I'm going to have to tidy this little project away for a minute because I've got a question here, don't know if we can focus on it, from Aldomalaca. His question is, my solar cell don't work, why? So I'll do my best to answer the question for him. I assume that he's talking about the solar cell in this kit because that's the video that he's asked the question on. Now, I've already used this kit, so the parts are already assembled. And the solar cell is this little package that you put together. It's normally separate, so you have to take it right apart. Don't want to break anything as I do it. Okay, so that's the solar cell in this particular package, and as you can see it's got a couple of wire springs on the end of it to make contact. See if I can get it right out. These other wires off that I've been using. Okay, so that's the original solar cell. So there's quite a few questions to answer before we can establish whether it's working or not. And the first thing I suppose to look at is, are the connections still in place? Because it's soldered in place there and there. So as long as it's soldered in place, we'll assume that we've got contact. Next thing we need to do is establish whether the electric motor works, because I'm assuming that he's got no test meters or anything like that that you can use to test it. So this is the electric motor all assembled already. There's an electric motor in there. I'm not going to take it apart. But with this kit, what they do is they rely on these springs to make contact. The wires that come with it have been stripped back a little bit. They've still got the insulation on the end, but you've got this piece of uninsulated wire that you use for making contact. Pulled that right off now. But that just goes in there like that. So, with this motor, or assembly that's got the motor in it, I've got the wires making contact now. What I'm going to do is use a small battery just to check that it actually works, because there's not much point in trying to establish whether the solar panel works if the motor that you're trying to run from it doesn't work. So I've got a battery. These are freshly charged. Right, that's trying to work. Okay, so I know that my electric motor works. So I suggest Aldomalaca that you check that first, because if the motor doesn't work with a battery on it, then it's not going to work with a solar cell on it. There's quite a few reasons why the motor might not work. And one of the problems is the gearing is a little bit rough, and if it's not just right, the motor can't turn. But we'll assume that your motor works, so we need to connect it to the solar cell. I'll leave it out of the packaging just so you can see. Right, by leaving it out of the packaging like that, we've got the problem that we might short the wires together. But what we need to do now is find a light bright enough to be the sun. I mean, if you live somewhere where you've got plenty of sun anyway, then great, but I don't. It's not a sunny day today. Make sure you haven't got your wires touching on the back here, otherwise that will be shorting the cell out. Now, if I come over here, where I've got my light, you'll see that nothing's happening. Well, it's just trying. If you saw that, it moved a tiny bit. And that's because this is one of those CFL compact fluorescent lights, and it doesn't give enough light for this solar cell to work. So I need to change the bulb to something a bit brighter so we can actually test it. So I'll have to change the bulb now. Right, I've changed the bulb, so let's see if we can do this again. So that's my next suggestion. Make sure that you're using the right type of bulb to supply the power. So say if you live somewhere where it's a bright sun outside, then fine, go outside and try the sun. If it's a slightly overcast day, it may not work. Solar cells don't give a lot of power, so if there's anything wrong with your electric motor, or if you haven't made the right connection with the wires, if you've left the insulation on, then you may find the solar cell's absolutely fine and it's a problem with your wiring or your motor. The only other thing that might be wrong with it is if you've actually, well, if these connectors have fallen off, if the solder's come loose, or if somebody's stepped on the solar cell and cracked it. Because if it's broken and it's not making a circuit through it, then it's not going to work either. But that's the best I can do to answer your question. So, Aldomalaca, that's the best answer I can give you. If your solar cell's not working, you need to do some basic checks. Make sure that the solder connections are still okay. Make sure that you've taken the insulation off the wires so that it's the wire that's making contact. And make sure that your gearing on your motor's okay, that it's not sticking. And make sure that the connections on the motor are okay. And if none of that helps, then I'm sorry, maybe your solar cell is actually broken.